My name is Nancy Roberts. I'm an economics professor at Arizona State University. Today I want to continue our discussion of costs. In the previous video we talked about total costs. Two kinds of total costs, total variable costs and total fixed costs. And obviously if you want total costs, you would sum the two kinds of costs you have. You would sum fixed costs plus variable costs. That would give you your total costs. And we graphed those yesterday. Today I want to discuss per unit graphs. And so these would be our marginal and our average graphs. And so marginal is a very important concept to economics. So what I want to do is explain exactly what we mean by marginal cost and then talk about how we find it. Marginal just means the change in or additional. And so if I ask about the marginal cost of producing the third widget, what I'm asking is, how much will my costs change when I produce the third widget? What's the change in costs when I make the third widget? What's the additional cost to make the third widget? And so what we have to do is just look at the difference in the cost of the previous unit and the cost of the next unit. And so we can do that here. Remember that our fixed costs are $100 and they don't change no matter how much we produce. Well, so the only costs that are going to change are my variable costs here. So to construct our marginal costs, what we are going to do is look at the change in our variable costs. So when I go from making no widgets to making one widget, my costs change by $20. So the marginal cost of the first unit is $20. Even though my total costs of producing nothing are $100, my total costs of producing one unit are $120, so that change was from 100 to 120, so the change is 20. The marginal cost of the first widget is $20. That means if I go from producing nothing to producing one unit, my costs are up by $20. If I go from producing one unit to producing a second unit, my costs go up by $18. If I go from producing the second unit to the third unit, my costs go up by $13. What you can see is my variable costs are increasing, but they're increasing at a decreasing rate. The first unit increases my cost by $20. The second unit increases my cost by $18. The third unit by $13. The fourth unit by $11. So my marginal costs are falling. Now I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the rest of the chart, but you understand how we figure out marginal costs just by looking at the change in the variable cost. So I'll go ahead and finish filling this out. 11, then it starts going back up. My marginal costs go back up. From the fourth to the fifth, I go from 62 to 75, which is a change of $13. The next one is $20, so my marginal costs are continuing to increase. 23, 27, 32, and 38. So let's talk about why marginal costs would at first decrease and then increase. It's based on the productivity of the workers, of the inputs, the variable inputs, that we're using to make these units. You know, when we talked about marginal productivity, we said at first marginal productivity will increase, but at some point the law of diminishing marginal productivity says if you continue to add these variable inputs, their marginal productivity will begin to decrease. And in fact, think about this. If we hire one worker and he can make 5 widgets, and we pay him $5, then our widgets on average cost $1 a piece. If we hire a second worker, and from the second worker we can get an additional 10 widgets, but we pay the second worker $5, then we're now paying $5 for 10 widgets, which means the cost of those widgets has gone down. If we hire a third worker and he adds 15 widgets to our production, we pay him $5, then my costs have gone down even further. And that's what's happening here. When marginal costs are decreasing, that means the marginal productivity of the variable inputs is increasing. Once marginal costs start to increase, then diminishing marginal productivity has set in. It's not a bad thing. It just means that additional inputs yield positive amounts of output, but in smaller and smaller increments. And so here's my marginal cost curve. And if we draw the marginal cost, it obviously is going to start out high, decrease, and then turn around and come back up. And so here's what my marginal costs look like. There's my marginal cost curve. One widget, the marginal cost is $20. The second widget, the marginal cost is $18. The third widget, the marginal cost is $13. The fourth, $11. So you can see marginal costs are decreasing. Then they start to go back up, 13, 20, 23, and out here on the 10th widget, the marginal costs are $38. So there's my marginal cost. I think it looks like the Nike symbol. That's the way I always tell students. Have a look. It's the Nike symbol. That's your marginal cost curve. It's a very important curve because decisions are made at the margin. So a lot of producers' decisions are based on this marginal cost curve. The next curve I want to look at is going to be average variable costs. So let's think about what that means. Average variable cost. What is the cost, the average variable cost, if I make 3 widgets, they cost $51. Sorry, yes, 3 widgets, they cost $51. On average, what is the variable cost of each of those 3 widgets? So on average, each of those widgets has $17 in variable costs associated with it. If I make 2 widgets, that's $38 are my total variable costs. So on average, each of those 2 widgets has $19 worth of variable costs associated with it. 1 widget, $20. Each of the 1 widget has $20 in variable costs. So basically, we're just taking the total variable cost, dividing by the number of widgets we've made, and that will tell us on average how much did each of those widgets cost. So we can go ahead and finish filling in this chart, and you can see my average variable costs are also decreasing. 20, 19, 17, 15, 50, 15. So down, down, down. If I make 6 widgets, on average, the variable cost is $15.83. So now it's starting to go back up. At first, average variable costs fall, then they start to go back up, and we'll graph that here, and we'll see why in a minute. $15.83, $16.86, $18.13. Again, you find this by taking the total variable cost and dividing by the number of widgets you're producing. $19.67 and $21.50. So, if someone says, when you make 7 widgets, on average, what's the variable cost associated with each of those 7 widgets? Well, the total variable cost is $118, so it'd be $118 divided by 7, which would be $16.86. So when we draw our average variable cost curve, you'll notice at first it decreases, 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 and then it starts increasing. And in fact, where is that? At about 5.5, so about in here. Okay, so if we draw our average variable cost curve, you can see it decreases, 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 and then it turns around and starts increasing. And so when we draw it, here it is right here. Here's my average variable cost. And again, we see this relationship that we're going to see over and over and over again, and that is the relationship between marginal and average. And the relationship is always that marginal is in charge. If the additional, that's what marginal means, if the additional unit has lower costs than the average of all the units, it's going to pull the average down. And we can see that between the first and the fifth widget, the marginal costs are beneath the average variable cost. So the average variable costs are going to be pulled down because marginal is beneath it. Even when marginal starts to increase, it's still beneath the average, so it's pulling it down. On the sixth widget, what you will notice is the marginal cost is greater than the average variable cost. So that means when we produce that sixth widget, that widget costs more, that one widget, than the average of all the previous widgets, and therefore it's going to pull the average up. And that's going to continue once we continue to produce widgets because the marginal is greater than the average. So here's marginal and average variable cost. Now, there's one other average cost curve we need to put in here, and that's our average total costs. So you will remember we started this whole discussion by saying we have fixed costs equal to $100. And therefore, to convert this total variable cost curve to a total cost curve, all I'd have to do is add $100. So I'm going to do that. And so my total costs are going to be $100 when I produce nothing, $120 when I produce one, $138 when I produce two, one, 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 one. This is going to be $218. This is going to be $245, $277, $315. Total costs. So if I now want to discover average total costs, then I'm going to use my total cost figures, these total cost figures right here, divided by the number of widgets I'm making, and we will generate an average total cost curve, which is going to be the summation of my variable costs and my fixed costs. So if I make one widget, my total costs are $120. So on average, the total cost associated with each one of those widgets is $120. Does that show up? If I make two widgets, my total costs are $138. So on average, the total cost associated with each of these two widgets is $69. $69. Three widgets, my total costs are $151. So on average, the total cost associated with each of those three widgets is $50.33. Now, look at what's happening to my average total costs. They're going down, down, down. I'll finish filling this in, but you understand how we're doing this. We're taking the total cost, dividing by how many widgets we're producing, which will give us the average total cost. In other words, when I make three widgets, on average, the total cost associated with each of those three widgets is $50.33. And that gives us $151 total. So I'm going to finish filling this in. 50, 33. The next one is 40, $50, $40.50. Then it's $35. Look what's happening to my average total cost. They're going down. Then it's $32.50. Then it's $31.14. $30.63. My average total costs are still falling. Ah, here we go. $30.78. Now they're starting to go back up. $31.50. And so if we graph this, 8.5 in here somewhere. My average total costs start way up here off of the board. I can't even mark it because the average total cost of the first unit is 120. That's way up there in the ceiling. So it starts it decreases, 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 and somewhere between 8 and 9 units, somewhere in here, it turns around and starts to go back up. So this is my average total cost curve. Now, look at the relationship between marginal and average. Average is being pulled down as long as marginal is beneath it. Average is being pulled up as long as marginal is above it. Here's my U-shaped average total cost curve, my U-shaped average variable cost. And what I want you to notice is this distance between these two. Let's look at this distance right here. Let's call it AB. That distance right there is the average fixed cost at 9 units. What about this distance right here? That distance, which is bigger than this, is the average fixed cost at 3 units. This distance right here is the average fixed cost at 1 unit. And so the average fixed cost just gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more output you produce. It actually asymptotically approaches 0. If we were to just produce 100 widgets, the average fixed cost is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller the more we produce. So this is cost curves, and it's your worst nightmare.